Hello tankers and tankettes, and welcome to my look at the Object 252U, which is coming in two different variants. The Defender with the special camo, as you can see here, and then a naked variant where you can put your own camo on, but then obviously you have to pay for it. Well, you know, in the client, because you're paying for it anyway, it's a premium tank. So this is a Tier 8 Soviet Heavy, yet another one, and it's not got limited matchmaking, because that's just not a thing anymore. So, in some ways, it's kind of like a non-pref MM IS-6, but then we kind of already have that in the game in the form of the IS-3A. So, yeah, there's nothing that special about this tank. There's one or two things that do stand out a little bit, but overall, yeah, it's got troll armour and it's got a gun with troll handling. And if you're expecting anything different, you're going to be a bit disappointed. So we'll have a quick look at the stats. This is as tanks.gg displays them with 100% crew but no equipment or anything. And I've not been able to fit maybe all the tanks on screen that I would have wanted, but I've made what I think is a pertinent selection. So we've got the IS-6, the IS-3A, the regular IS-3, the Levert and the T-34 as well. And of course, we now have other non-preferential Tier 8 premium heavies in the form of the Levert and the T-26C5. Still can't remember the nickname of that, but yeah, I think comparisons between this, the IS-3A and the T-34 are particularly relevant. So, the DPM is actually fairly average. 1800's not especially exciting, but it's not especially bad. I mean, you look at the Lurv and the T-34, which have higher penetration but lower DPM. Now, the T-34 in particular, why it's a relevant tank to compare is because up until now it's had one of the bigger guns for a Tier 8 heavy. Just even of any of the regular heavies, it's had that 120mm gun with 400 average damage. The gimmick, if you like, of the 252 is that it's got a 122mm gun, but it's 440 damage instead of 390. So this then makes it now the biggest at Tier 8 in terms of the alpha damage that it'll do for a heavy tank. And you don't especially pay the price with a bad DPM for that, but you will pay the price in other ways. So if we scroll down a bit to the gun handling, aim time, not actually that bad. The base aim time is the same as the T-34. Accuracy, however, we then start to notice some of the penalties. Now, it's not actually quite as bad as the IS-6 and the IS-3A. It's still not good. 0.42 is pretty derpy, but it's way better than 0.44, as you can see there. I think that, in fact, the base gun stats are like, what, 0.46 for those guns? But, of course, this is displayed as with a 100% crew. Your dispersion is very slightly worse than the IS-6, but better than the IS-3A. The IS-3A is never a tank I especially liked, just because of that terrible gun handling, and then you weren't particularly accurate at the end of it. And the T-34 has even worse dispersion to work with, and there's one of the hallmarks of the T-34 is that the gun handles rather badly, but the big point of difference between the T-34 and any of the Russians is that at the end of it you've got this actually quite accurate 0.34 accuracy, whereas these you spend a long time aiming, you've got bad gun bloom, and at the end of it you don't have particularly good accuracy, and that is certainly true for the 252. So it's better off than the IS-3A, and it's slightly better off than the IS-6 in some ways, but slightly worse off than others. One of the big things this has, you can see over any of the other premiums listed here except the Lurver, is the bloom after firing. So if you're sat stationary and just firing your gun, it's going to take less time for the reticle to settle back down again. But that doesn't especially matter, as you've got quite a long reload. The reload on this gun is, so if we can find it, the base reload, here we go, 14.38, which is actually the same as the T-34. It is a long reload on this gun, and sometimes you will find that to be a problem, because you'll have somebody that you didn't quite manage to kill with your big punchy shell on the first shot, and then you've got to sit around waiting for that reload. Now, with a gun rammer and a good crew, I got it down to, I might even have had vents on the tank, the test account I was using. It was around about 13 point something seconds, but that's still quite a long reload. So you have to peekaboo if you can. You have to use cover, because the armor, whilst kind of troll, is not overall that reliable. It's not armor that you can safely potentially just sit out in the open and use unless it's against enemies that you know can't pen you. It's armor where sometimes it'll just work and other times it really will not. It seems very dependent on the whims of what RNG is doing with the enemy tank's shells. So anyway, that long reload is definitely an issue, but of course, because you've got the higher damage on your shells, you've got better DPM. That's why the DPM is that much better than the T-34. But of course, the T-34's got a better chance to hit after the end of all the aiming and the gun bloom. Gun depression, -6, elevation 20, so exactly the same as the IS-6. Actually better than the IS-3A, and it's slightly better than the IS-3 in terms of its depression, but slightly worse in elevation, which is going to matter on some maps, actually, that extra 3 degrees. So in that regard, completely identical to the IS-6. So yeah, -6 is all right. You can work with it. It's not great. The strongest armor you've got really is around the turret, although you've also got some weak spots on the turret, but it's not like you're going to be able to go hull down that often with -6. Mobility, it actually feels pretty decent, I have to say. Once again, you can see that a lot of the stats they seem to be copy-pasted almost from the IS-6. So overall, it feels fairly mobile. The only way in which the IS-3A really beats it is with a better top speed, but worse horsepower per ton ratio. So, and obviously there's the better terrain resistance as well. So I don't know, actually. On flat ground, the IS-3A versus the 252, I'm not sure which would be better off, but the 252 will accelerate to its top speed before the IS-3A can get there, potentially. So yeah, the terrain resistances, they're okay. It's a reasonably mobile heavy tank, much like the other ISs or the IS series tanks at tier 8. So you do have that going for you. It does have that level of flexibility. Lastly, armor and hit points. Well, 1500 is bang on the same as the IS-3 and the T-34, so not especially good for your tier, but not especially bad. It's pretty damn average. The armor values, as you can see, as given, are pretty good, but definitely not the best for the tier, and we will come to the armor in a bit more detail very shortly. View range, 350 meters, bang on average again for a tier 8 Soviet heavy. So yeah, in a lot of ways, there's nothing especially different or special about it. It's really down to that big hitting gun and that long reload. And in all other regards, you might as well be playing, one of the other Soviet heavy tanks. Now, I will say, despite the fact that it's a 122, I don't think the ammo is especially expensive for the damage that it does. So just a note on the fact that it is a premium, it seems to make pretty good credits. So if you're looking for something especially as a credit earner, the 252 seems to do pretty well in that regard. Anyway, onto the armor. So it's, as you will have noticed, the pike nose configuration that you find in the IS-3 and the IS-3A, and of course there's the IS-5 as well. We didn't have that on the comparison list. Well, that's another one that's, I think, technically a reward tank, not a premium, but a similar sort of ish machine anyway. So you've got quite a big lower front plate. It's not maybe showing up that well with the yellow, but it's overall, like, the overall armor is actually, it's pretty good. But when I say it's troll, well, with the pike nose, generally your strongest configuration is facing towards the enemy, but that makes your quite big lower front plate a bit vulnerable. And it's really vulnerable to same tier and above tanks. Lower tier tanks are going to maybe have a hard time penetrating this. You need sort of tier 8 heavy levels of penetration in order to be able to reliably punch through that. But having said that, RNG is still a thing. I've been penned by things like T29s in the lower front plate when I was playing this, and obviously that required either a higher penetration roll, or maybe they were just firing a PCR, because of course, let's not forget, premium ammo is a thing in this game. The upper part of the front glacis is actually slightly weaker in terms of raw armor value, but with the way it slopes, yeah, that is by far your best frontal hull armor. You can maybe even, like, depending on the enemies that you're facing, you could angle to get slightly more effective armor on your lower front plate, but it's not going to help you by that much. And of course, you're weakening whatever the near side nose plate is. But you have to be angling quite far to, if somebody gets the side of it, you can see there it drops right down to sort of less than 200 millimeters effective. So a tiny bit of angle I think you can get away with if you're in a situation where your lower front plate is potentially exposed, but it's not going to help a huge deal. The turret armor, well, it's both some of your strongest and weakest armor in that you've got these rather exposed commander's hatches, rather more so than on the IS-6, the IS-3s, I think even the IS-5. So they're quite prominent, and they're only 150 millimeters. So for a lot of lower tier enemies, even higher tier enemies, even if you're trying to be hulled down with that all this lovely looking red strong turret armor that's also sloped, those are going to be a big shoot me sign. So yeah, it's kind of hard to hide them as well, because it's not like, say, the Super Pershing where it really is only one side that's vulnerable. You've actually got two of these things. The front of the turret, however, if you can get people to not shoot at those, I mean, having said it's a big shoot me sign, it's not that big. They're not huge. At medium to long ranges, they're going to be quite hard to hit, but at close ranges, in fact, if you're trying to face hug somebody, they'll be able to stick the gun right through those, so you should probably try and avoid that. But yeah, anyway, as for the rest of the turret, it's pretty tough. You've got a reasonably bouncy gun mantlet, and you've got some absurdly thick plates of armor around the edges there of the turret, and even the less thick stuff, this is really sloped. You've got up to, did I just see like 1,000 millimeters equivalent there? I think I did briefly, but oh, there we go. That's just at the edges there. That's getting over a meter of effective armor. So if you can get people to shoot the front of the turret, it's gravy. It's really bouncy. But yeah, this not so much. And of course, being one of the IS series tanks, you've also got quite a squashy turret roof as well, 55 millimeters. So that's going to be not that many guns that can reliably overmatch that, but there are going to be some in the game. So that's something to watch out for. Now, there's one last note on the armor, and that is, well, you've noticed perhaps that it's got rather a prominent turret ring, and the turret ring itself is at the front anyway, at 230, 250 in places. So the raw armor value is quite tough, although around the back and rear it's not so much. But this does make for a bit of a shot trap, and you'll see in one of the games I get penned by a shell that either ricochets, I think it ricochets from the hull and goes into the bottom of the turret, but it's also possible to have shells ricocheting down into the hull from the turret, vice versa, because there's this really soft bit of 30mm armor here. And even the commander's hatch from the front, which is the driver's hatch rather, which is quite sloped, but yeah, it's only 60 millimeters, so that is a weak point potentially. But from the front, that's quite a small thing to hit. And if somebody's on flat ground, unless you're firing down into that's going to be a ricochet angle. But if something ricochets from your turret down into that, yeah, that is probably going to kill your driver. And actually, on that note, I did notice my driver dying a lot, way more than any other crew member, mostly through lower front plate pens. So the driver is sat right there, and if your lower front plate gets penned, they probably will expire. So having a premium med kit, there we go, I had to think of the word there, having a premium med kit might well be advisable on this tank. So enough about that. Let's jump in some actual gameplay and see how this thing performs on the battlefield. So here we are, my very first game in this thing in fact, and it's tier 10. I seem to see quite a lot of tier 10s, and I know that's just bad luck, but of course it is a fact of life with this thing. However, for being tier 10 matchmaking, it's not actually that bad. About half the team is tier 8s, and of the tier 9 and 10s, the only one that would really give me issue in terms of not being able to pen it is the VKB and maybe the E75. It depends how well they're playing. So this is highway, and as you can see, almost the entire team is heading towards the town. So I decide, possibly foolishly, to turn around and try and maybe do something if one of the enemy scouts comes to the base. If it's anything more than an enemy scout, then I am screwed. But it's one of those times when you just have to sigh, shrug your shoulders, look at what the rest of the team's doing and think, you know, it would really suck if we got capped out by an enemy scout. So I guess I'd better go and do something about it. So I pushed up a little ways without encountering anything. One of the enemy scouts has been encountered down there. Another one has actually died already, the 1375. But we've just lost one of our own, and well, we'd already lost the Bulldog as well. So we're out of scout tanks already, and they've still got one left alive. Now naturally he spots me because I'm in a heavy tank. But, well, for some reason their artillery had killed himself by this point. You'll notice that their arty's dead, but we've only got one kill on our team. Yes. He drove up against the side of a building and blew his own brains out, figuratively speaking. Possibly this was an XVM user that didn't fancy his team's chances and took the cowardly way out. I don't know. But regardless, he suicided and thus perpetuated that particular stereotype for just a little bit longer. So I'm particularly hesitant about pushing up. They do have some tank destroyers that might be watching over in this direction, but there's been a real lack of any kind of anything thus far. It looks like most of the enemy team went to the town as well, barring that 1390 that's been spotted. I do also have the Scorpion that, like, he was going to go with the group into town and then saw I was going this way and decided, okay, if somebody with some armor is going to be over here, then I'll stick around and give them some fire support. And the Scorpion's fast enough that it could run away potentially. So I move up thinking, oh, there's nothing here. And then it turns out, no, actually, that's one of the enemy can't even speak, one of the enemy tier 10s. Just sat there, just chilling behind a building. And I'm actually going to do a thing here, because he gets set on fire by the Scorpion. I hold, but then he doesn't quite burn out, so I take the kill anyway. So I think I was trying to be nice guy Jedi there, but possibly I should have just pulled the trigger when I'd loaded, because, you know, the longer he was alive, the more he was spotting us for enemies. So that was a bit weird, but okay, he's out the way with that. Oh, look, there's another one. Yes, the enemy Emil 1. Not even in a position to support that AMX, just chilling on the field. Just enjoying himself. Again, no idea. So, anyhow, so we definitely know the Scorpion is defending the base. I'm actually bouncing some shots here, and at these longer ranges, that's where the armour becomes more useful. But the one that has penned did pen through the lower front plate, and there's another pen. Not quite sure where that one was, but firing down into my frontal armour like that, you know, there's a good choice of places where it could have penned. So that's a nasty hit. I can't really afford to take another one of those. But unless he wants to really expose himself, then yeah, I should be quite safe under his gun for the time being. Now, having predicted earlier that a scout might try to get through to our base, that is in fact entirely what happened, and he, I think, killed our artillery as well. But he doesn't stick around to try and cap. And it does look like we're on the back foot at the moment, but maybe not that much so. Maybe the scout gets a bit overconfident, thinks, I'll go up and help the team, I won't try and cap, and thus, well, yes, that could have been a major threat, but instead we don't have to worry about it at all. And the entire reason I went across to that flank to begin with was to try and counter some sneaky scout or fast tank getting through to try and cap. As it is, though, I'm mostly being an armoured scout for our Scorpion. I have done way more spotting damage at this point than I have actual damage myself. Although with that HE hit into the Scorpion, that actually takes me up to a fairly respectable amount. So anyway, here we see, I mean, I've bounced a couple of shots from the Scorpion, and you know how good a gun that is. I might have bounced a shot there from the Skoda, and so the armour, like, it works sometimes. Sometimes it will bounce things. Sometimes it's troll. Sometimes it works for you. But it doesn't feel like reliable armour. It's not like a KV4 where I can go, okay, I'm going to angle this much and I might be able to bounce something. It just doesn't work like that in this tank. So anyway, I'd backed off thinking the Scorpion would just reload and come out and clip me, but then our, not the Scorpion, the Skoda rather, but then the Scorpion put a hit in, leaving him a one-shot, and so, well, at that point I might as well go forward and take my chances, and I did. So that just leaves the enemy Waffenträger Panzer IV. Now, I'm not going to risk anything else at this stage. I've had an okay game. It's been maybe more remarkable for the spotting damage than the damage done, but I don't want to risk myself to that Waffenpanzer's gun, so I'm just going to let the rest of the team come up and finish him, and they do, and that's that. So there we are. That maybe showed a bit off the armour, but more it was the teamwork in that one. It was finding that Scorpion player and just being able to spot for them and tank the damage. And you also got to see the mobility as well. The mobility of this thing is actually pretty good. Now, that being a tier 10 game, it was actually the tier 8s that really stole the show there. The top 4 places on the team are all tier 8s, and then it's a tier 1 10 E5 at the 5th place. So, yeah. So all in all, fairly quick match. That 2k damage plus the 2.5k spotting netted me nearly 90,000 credits, so that's not bad. And you might get a brief glimpse at my crew skills there as well. I had a reasonably good crew in this. It was like a 4-skilled crew I picked out. So with Brothers in Arms, bear in mind everything you see here is with Brothers in Arms. I think a gun rammer and ventilation. But I wasn't using food because I thought the risk of getting set on fire was maybe just a bit too much. So this game and the next game will both be tier 8 games, which is obviously where this thing is at its strongest. And in this case, there's a healthy complement of tier 6s to pick on at the bottom of the team. And against most tier 6s, you can basically laugh at their guns. They might be able to pen your weak spots, your command attaches. And there are maybe 1 or 2 tank destroyers where you would have to worry about your lower front plate. But overall, you can pretty much just point and laugh whilst you reload your horrendous monster gun and blow them away for most of their hit points. So I was feeling like being a little more aggressive here, just testing out the armour, but not crazily so. They do have artillery for me to be concerned about. It doesn't matter how good your armour is, artillery doesn't care. So I get a nice shot into the hull of that T-34 and then back off while I reload, because that long reload, yeah, it does sometimes really hamper you. That's definitely the biggest downside of this tank, is quite how long it takes. But in this case it was long enough to get another shell off. I do take a hit in return though. The armour didn't work for me quite that time, but I have mortally wounded that guy. So whilst my allies are taking some interest here frontally, there might be a little opportunity to get around the side of the Abbey and put a shot or 2 in that way, because there's nobody really watching this way. Of course I am auto-spotted, we're all well within auto-spot range of each other through this building, but they are occupied with what's in front of them. The only thing that might potentially be a problem, the VKA, is not really paying attention. So I finish off with the T-34 with a slightly high roll, in fact, that's quite nice. When it rolls high, you can really do some damage with this gun, but sometimes it's like the bigger alpha guns, you almost have to learn not to rely on even getting average damage rolls, because sometimes the low damage rolls will troll you just a bit. So VKA, another high damage roll with, what was that, 460? I think you can roll up to like 500, above 500, I'm not sure, I'd have to actually grab a calculator to figure that out, but anyway, you can roll pretty high with this gun. And then a bit of a sneaky kill secure on that Super Pershing. So almost 3,000 damage done, and there's opportunity to do a little bit more as well, potentially. So that was the first and only time the artillery really took a pot shot at me. Although, having said that, I think he might take a pot shot at me later on as well, but he never does hit in this one. And there's the gun trolling me a bit. Well, that is to be expected. I'll go for the lower front plate there, but it went into the... I think it pinged onto the bottom armour of the... I'm not entirely sure. But unless you have the time to fully aim this gun, and even when you do fully aim this gun, sometimes it will just troll the ever-living heck out of you. Some of the shots I have in these games that you're seeing are quite lucky, really, considering you can only get away with the kind of auto-aiming and firing on the move and whatever at closer ranges, at longer ranges. It's just not a reliable gun at all. So that was a very chancy shot, didn't work, and he's probably going to kill our artillery, but we've won at this point anyway, so it doesn't matter. So there we go, finishes off the arty, but I finish him off. And again, that was quite a lucky shot, especially as I was on the move. So that just leaves a scout and artillery. Now I actually truncated this replay because after the scout dies, so it takes us about a minute and a half, 2 minutes to actually find and kill the arty, and I don't get the kill, sadly. I'm going to get the kill on this guy for my 5th kill, but the artillery gets found by somebody else first, and so therefore no top gun. Oh well. But I did end that one with 3,500 damage done and a high caliber, and over 100,000 credits made. So, as I've said, this feels like it is a good moneymaker, especially with the premium account. It feels like you can... even a relatively modest amount of damage will net you a pretty good profit. And if you can stand the trollness of the gun, the mobility does come in very useful. So there we go. It was 101,000, almost 102,000 raw income, and then 88k profit at the end of that. But even without a premium account, still 54k, which is not bad. It's not bad at all. Last game I've got for you is Lakeville. Again, top tier. Again, lots of tier 6s and tier 7s to beat up. This was very good matchmaking. And this time round I'm going to be a bit more aggressive. Partly because I know it's good matchmaking, and also because, well, I kind of have to be. Look at the minimap right now. The vast majority of our team, or it felt like the vast majority, it was probably only like half the team, but still, a lot. A lot went to the valley, and that's not good on Lakeville. So, the fact that I am top tier in this quite well armoured Soviet heavy is going to be very useful. So that was a bit of a lucky shot, not entirely fully aimed, but fortunately for me, he's going to get tracked. There we go, and well, with the reload, I have more than enough time to fully aim, and then it's just fingers crossed. And there we go, I get it. But at that range, it very easily could have missed. So that's that guy done. The E25 that's on the centre path is withdrawing, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit here to see me pushing forwards as the enemy team really sent nothing to the town. Half our team piled into the valley. Their team didn't even, like, we've had 3 tanks that have gone to the town. We've got a Hellcat and an IS that are being a bit useless, but the enemy team are being even worse. And so we're now just pushing into this massive cluster of enemy tanks. So I've gotten a couple of bounces from the Nashorn with the 88mm. Well, it must be the 88mm for the 240 blocked. Also quite easily bouncing the E25 shots. But I did take a hit from something. I'm not sure what that was, but it was for about 300. So possibly the Dickomax, maybe the T28 prot. Anyway, the Dickomax does get spotted, but, well, like I said, this is not a good gun for long-range shots. You really want to be in their face, and even if you're in their face, sometimes it will troll the ever-living heck out of you. We're just closing the net around these guys, but of course, pushing into such a concentrated knot of firepower is dangerous in its own right. So this still could go wrong. It still could go against us. Now, there's no artillery in this match, at least. We don't have that to worry about. But we're about to see in this one, reasonably shortly, I can't remember exactly when it happens, but one of those weird ricochet bounces where I get penned by something ricocheting up into the turret. So the Tiger 1, I know I don't have to worry too much about, but the CDC does have enough pen. Not a huge amount of alpha. I don't know why I looked away there. But anyway, so that's one into the CDC turret. That's fine. I am bouncing a fair bit here, because most of these guns I don't have to especially worry about. But that prot, well, this is where 6 degrees of gun depression doesn't feel quite enough. And I was trying to aim for this prop, and oh, there we go. So I was initially a bit confused. I was thinking, where did that pen? But you can see the bounce mark on the hull going up into the pen mark on the bottom of the turret. So it's a bit of a shot trap, that turret. Sometimes you will get situations where you think, okay, I should be relatively fine. They're at long enough distance so that it probably will be quite difficult for them to hit my commander's hatches, and then, you know, that will happen. Something that bounces and then actually pens up through the turret because of that gap between the turret and the hull, forming that shot trap. So that is a bit of a flaw. That's another way in which the armour is not that reliable. And it didn't happen that often. That's the only time it definitely happened, but there's one or two other times when it might have been the case that happened. So I'm kind of low on health now, thanks to that extremely troll bounce. But that was very lucky. If we can get the prot out of the way, the rest of the guns we really don't have to worry that much about. So there we go, that's the prot down. We've just closed the noose around these guys. I've not even really gotten that much spawning this time, because there's the guys that did actually push through the valley at horrendous cost, but we've got the Carnarvon and an A44 that managed to push through out of all the tanks that went that way. And on my side, well, it's just been the T29 and the VK giving me fire support, essentially. So that was a really terrible shot. There's no excuse for that. That was just outright bad. But it came at a moment when it honestly didn't matter at all anyway, because we've won. With CDC down, that's the last kill, and 3,000 damage done, 3.4k blocked. About 900 spotting and assistance damage. I think it was pretty much all spotting damage that time. And again, a high caliber. And I feel like just in a slower tank like the Lerva, by the time I pushed through to the enemy base, we might have lost too many tanks. Or a T-34. But it's got enough speed. And speed equals flexibility in this game. And when you've got that kind of flexibility and reasonably effective armor, it's a pretty good combination. It's just the gun. The gun I found really frustrating at times. And that's true for tanks like the IS-6, the WZ-111, the 112, even tanks like the regular IS, and of course you've got the premium IS-2 and the regular IS-2, and even the old KV-1S with 122. I never really liked that tank, and it's because of that really troll gun handling and the long reload, and that's basically what this is. Really troll gun handling. Not quite as troll as, say, the IS-3A, as we've seen, but still fairly troll and a long reload. And that combination is just going to rub some people up the wrong way. Other people will be able to have the patience and to make it work, and for those people, I think it's going to be a very profitable tank. But overall, I don't think there's anything especially game-breaking or anything. I think this tank has enough weaknesses when you're fighting against it that it is entirely possible to outplay somebody. Of course, if you meet one of these when you're bottom tier in a tier 6, it's bad news, but it's exactly the same if you meet an IS-6 or an IS-3 or an IS-3A. So Yeah, it's not exceptional in that regard at all. So overall, not a bad tank. Yeah, it's okay. It's another troll armoured, derpy gun handling Soviet heavy tank. There's not much more to say really, although apparently I've taken 35 minutes to say it. So hopefully you have enjoyed this and found it useful. And if you have, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.